All right, class, we're gonna continue with number 7. We are going to answer the last part is to determine what is the domain of this function and what is the range of this function. Think about domain as what are the possibilities of x in this function, and for the range is what are the possibilities of the range of the function, possibilities of y in the function. So the way we want to focus this is by, I like to think about it as creating like a shadow for the domain. Make a shadow on the x value. So how much is the graph? How much is this graph covering in terms of x? You notice that right here it covers the -3. Here it covers the -5. Say that here it covers, let's say, -7. Here there's no coverage because there's a hole, but next to it it does cover it. Here it covers it. Here it covers it 5, and so on. So in fact, because it is a line, straight line, it has infinite points, so it's actually covering all those points. So if you think about it, if you're like creating a shadow of this graph into this x-axis, the shadow is going to look something like this. So a reflection of that function onto the x-axis, except that here it would be a circle because of that right there. And then you're going to continue with this by saying, okay, well, what about the other function? Well, this point is going to cover that point. So now the point is covered. And then you're going to shadow every single point. In other words, reflect that function onto the x-axis. And because it goes forever, you're going to assume that the line is going forever. So to define the domain of this function, you're going to look at the line we created onto the x-axis, right, into this axis, and say, hey, how much did we actually cover? And we're going to define that by creating an interval. An interval is kind of like saying, to cover every point between 0 and 5, you're going to do 0 to 5. You're going to say, we're going to cover every number from 0 to 5 excluding 5 and 0. Same thing is here. You say, well, it actually covers all real numbers, right? Because it goes from -infinity to +infinity, right? So what we're going to say is exactly that. We're going to say this domain is an interval from -infinity to +infinity. And we're going to do the same thing for the range. But in this case, we're going to graph, or we're going to reflect this function onto the y-axis, right? So we're going to see here that this graph, if we start over here, this graph will be this hole will be reflected here, right? So it's going to create a hole, and then every single point is being shadowed or reflected onto this y-axis. Every single point, right? So what happens here is what we created is this number line, right? This number line is happening from here all the way to +infinity. If you notice, this also is creating this reflection onto the x-axis, but it actually is just an overlap, right? It's not adding anything new to it, but it's nonetheless, we still have to consider it. So pretty much the range is this interval that's covered in red, so excluding the -3. So how do we do that? We're going to say from -3 all the way to +infinity. So from -3 all the way to +infinity. And there you go, right? So we just described the range. I hope you guys found this helpful. Please let me